Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to 2021 Single Mothers Conference, our virtual visits of the year. Excuse me. My name is Siobhan, and I'm sitting here having a moment. My name is Siobhan, and I would like to introduce one of our favorite speakers that we have on our Single Mothers Conference, the podcast. It's Dalissy Washington, and she is a therapist and licensed clinical social worker. She's going to be discussing mental health and resilience. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat room for Zoom or on Facebook Live, and Dalissy will respond to them at the end of the presentation. Good luck, Dalissy, and we're waiting to hear everything that you have to tell us today.
Cool. Thank you so much, Siobhan, and thank you to the Single Mothers Conference for inviting me. It's my honor. It's my pleasure to join you guys virtually. And forgetting the titles, and yeah, I'm a mental health provider, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. But what I want you to think about during this time is that I'm human, simply put, just like everyone joining us. And all of the women, and it's about a shared humanity that connects us all. So I want us to focus on that. And I entitled the presentation Resilience equals Reinvention. I think it's the best of mental health and our human experience. And what I also know to be true is that we're all born with the capacity of resilience. Every single day, we have the opportunity of reinvention and reinventing ourselves to meet whatever challenge is. That's just what we get to do. So thank you to all of you joining, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. So to all of you beloved ladies, I say, I don't have to know you. I don't have to know who you are to tell you that I love you. I respect you. I believe in you. I am oh so proud of you. And today, just as you are, wherever you are, however you feel, your presence matters here on this earth. So whether you can really own that right now or believe that right now, you are loved, you are strong, and you are worthy. You're beautiful, and I'm challenging you to go into that space of more self-love. So, and that's a challenge for every day, to channel more self-love so that those truths I just mentioned become more of your lived experience. So I want to start with some education. I love talking about mental health because I'm just really curious about the human experience. I understand that things are hard, but I don't lose hope. I see the strength in like the sacrifices we make to live our best life. So for the next few slides, I'm going to define some of the main concepts, and then I'll move into some practical tips. And the end of it, I'll take some questions. So don't shy away. It's an opportunity for real talk. So one way to define mental health is that it is a state of well-being in which you realize your own potential. It means you can cope with stressors of life, you can work productively and fruitfully, and you are able to contribute to your community as you are. Some people avoid the conversation about mental health or feelings, or we say it's being too emotional, or I don't even want to go there. But what we know to be true is that mental health is of vital importance for us. It's worth making the time for it. It's constantly evolving. Yes, it can be very complex. We know it affects us in our everyday life, and that it's influenced by many factors. There's a lot of things that play into it. We also know that it's linked to physical health. Like that's what makes it so important. The mind and the body, it's all connected. So it is a part of us, And it's very real and deserves acknowledgement. Now, what it is not, and some of the stigma, we know it's not a sign of weakness by any means. It's not only about the negative. So we tend to think about it as shameful, or that it's all in our head, all in our mind, or that it's something that a person decides to have, and that it's only relevant for people who may struggle. That's not the case. Um, it's also, mental health is also not the same as mental illness. Like if we have a formal diagnosis, obviously there's an intersection, and mental health is about um, getting to a healthy place if you're suffering from a mental health disorder. But there is a difference. And then also, it is not something we start looking after or trying to repair only when it gets broken. It's something that we constantly want to be aware of and tending to, like addressing it. So let's define resilience. Resilience is an ability to recover or adjust easily to misfortune or change. Now, that's the Merriam-Webster dictionary. But psychologists define it as a process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. And that could be family and relationship problems. It could be serious health problems, emotional struggles, workplace and financial stressors, and the list goes on in terms of stressors. And I think we can all relate to that. So being resilient doesn't mean that it's a person, or it doesn't mean that you won't experience difficulty or distress. It's also not something where some people are resilient and some people aren't. We all have the capacity. In fact, people who have suffered major adversity or trauma in their lives, commonly they experience that emotional pain and stress, but it can also become a road to resilience post the emotional distress, or even in the midst of it. So while certain factors may make some individuals more resilient than others at different points of their lives, it's not that it's a personality trait. So the good news is that we have the opportunity um, to foster resilience, because really it's not about our personality. It's just about our behaviors, our thoughts, and our actions. And that means that any of us can learn or develop or become more and more resilient as we go through life. So, like building muscles, if we increase the resilience, it takes time and it takes intention. It takes like a commitment to honor that we actually have resilience within ourselves. And I believe that's what leads to reinvention. So, reinvention is defined as the action or process through which something is changed so much that it appears to be entirely new. And I know to think of the idea of entirely new seems big. So I think I'd rather say my own definition is thinking about the small and big ways that we may see changes, or we may experience some new things as we reinvent ourselves. And so self reinvention is really about changing our old ways and learning new things relevant to our life goals. It involves introspection, learning about ourselves, realizing who we want to be, understanding more about ourselves, eliminating bad habits little by little, cultivating those good habits little by little, and taking actions that can help us evolve into a better version of ourselves. So before you can reinvent yourself, you have to know who you currently are. And so I think that as humans, we need to understand our strengths. We need to understand and accept some of our weaknesses, while also understanding what we're passionate about and what our personal story is. Um, so, in light of the fact that we know we are still in the midst of a global pandemic with COVID-19, as people have tried to figure out how to cope, how to help others, we've dealt with grief, a heightened sense of anxiety and stress, and anxiety. And it's been like the biggest health challenge of our time. And it's had an impact on a lot of communities. And on a personal level, for many, I think people can go on and on about some of the challenges they faced. And without denying that, it's also this belief that sometimes out of the greatest challenges, opportunities can actually emerge. So the pandemic, yes, it changed our lives. Um, there were many negative changes, but perhaps there were many positive changes too. So we have to know that we can continue moving through the pandemic. And as we say that we're moving back into a normal, it's going to be a new normal. So through our lives, if we keep going, knowing that um, there will be things that will change us, um, we can start labeling that change as reinvention, because that allows us to honor what it means to work through things, knowing that we are becoming stronger and we're becoming more resilient. And that is to everyone, no matter what has happened, no matter what the lowest of lows have been during the pandemic. Or, some people would say this is the hardest thing they've dealt with. Other people would just say this was just it made my life worse because I was already having trouble, right? Um, and then we've also had many people who felt like things were going well, and then the pandemic completely caught them off guard, and they found themselves really struggling. So bringing it back to you, my beloved women, there's a popular social worker, Brene Brown, um, and this quote that I have up, she shared. So, owning your story and loving yourself through that process is the bravest thing you will ever do. So, take that in for a moment. Another author that I enjoy, she says, yes, life is brutal, but it's also beautiful. So, life is brutal. And I think sometimes we deny that there could be that mix, or that it can be both beautiful and brutal, or hard but still hopeful. So I'm here to remind you that no matter what is going on around you, circumstances, they don't have to have power over you. We do have to acknowledge our mental status. We have to acknowledge our feelings, our pain, but we don't need to understand why it's happening, because sometimes we just want full control. We want to understand the future. We want to understand how or why it's happening to us. And we think we need that in order to be happy. But a lot of times there's a lot of information we don't know. There's a lot of factors playing into our lives, where we really don't know what's coming next. Or the next day. We don't know what the next job might be. We don't know what the next opportunity might be. So what I'm saying is, don't let the impact of our world or this beautiful life shatter your thinking. You got through yesterday. You woke up today. You can do it over and over again. We just keep hitting repeat. So what we know is that when things aren't going our way, we have to find a way to accept it. And I think that's by acknowledging our feelings. But there's that balance between acknowledging what's going on for us, giving ourselves permission to feel what we feel. I have permission to feel angry. I have permission to feel disappointment. I have permission to feel really, really sad, or lonely, whatever it may be. The list goes on. But avoiding overindulging in that intensity and overwhelming feelings, um, is the goal. Because if we overindulge in it, I think it leads to resentment. And I think we've all experienced resentment towards like people, but to think about resentment, in our own lives, like where we're rejecting or like just have really negative emotional reactions to whatever we're going through. And resentment usually comes out of kind of feeling mistreated or that things are unfair. Um, why me? It could be a variety of emotions, but it's like this sense of like bitterness and hard feelings. And I really think resentment is one of those things that can become a barrier to resilience. Um, and we know it can come from simple things and really big things. So sometimes it can be just that there's this imbalance between work and our personal life, or that we're dealing with a lot of stressful things at once. Like, we hear people say, I just can't take one more thing, or I'm dealing with too much, or I can't catch a break. Sometimes it's even insufficient time and space to process those negative feelings. So I talk a lot about confronting those hard days and really thinking about things. Um, and sometimes if we don't give attention to that and we keep avoiding and we keep going, a lot of times that's what depletes us. And we end up finding ourselves feeling defeated. Um, Humiliating experiences also lead to a lot of like tension and resentment. And then what we tend to do is socially isolate instead of reaching out, or instead of utilizing the resources that we may have in our community. So I wanted to make sure to mention that and remind you that, um, we get through those dark days. Um, and whether we believe it or not, we have to get to that place, like to pause and say, I have resilience deep down inside, and that allows for some reinvention. So it's not about like avoiding the stress or minimizing the bad days, but it is about learning to thrive within that stress. So I want you to learn the power of pausing and taking that breath. And I consider that an opportunity at any point in your day, or even if you think of taking a pause on your life, but even throughout a day, taking a moment to power up again and gain perspective so that you can get to the functioning at your best. So I know you guys are going to ask me, but how? Life is too hard. Um, but from that perspective of using resilience for reinvention, um, there are many ways, right? I'm just covering a few because I want to give everyone time for questions. But making connections is one of them. And that's about accepting help and support from those who care about us and will listen to us, because we know that strengthens our resilience. That also means some people will say, no one cares, none of my family members, I have no friends. Well, reach out to a professional. Make the connection however you can. There are people who care. Another way is avoiding seeing crisis as like a impossible situation or insurmountable problem. So trying to look beyond the present moment, um, to how future circumstances may be a little better. Also accepting that change is a part of living, right? Accepting circumstances that can't be changed can actually help us focus on circumstances that we can alter, or that we have an opportunity to change. Another way to build that resilience is to move toward our goals. And that means doing something like on a regular basis, even if it's really small, that enables you to move toward or closer to that one goal you might have. And that could even be I'm going to have a conversation with someone about that goal today, or I'm going to reach out to someone that is maybe could share some insight about how I can reach this goal. And then another one is taking decisive actions rather than distancing yourself completely from the problem and the stresses and wishing that it would go away. It's acting on the situation as much as you can. If there's any opportunity to do something about it, you're going to take advantage of that. Another thing that helps is looking for opportunities for self-discovery. And this is embedded in that reinvention piece, right? People often learn something about themselves, and they may find that they have grown to some extent as a result of their struggle or even their loss. Nurturing a positive view of yourself is important, developing that confidence in your ability to solve problems and trusting your instincts. That also helps to build resilience. Keeping things in perspective. Even when we're facing really painful things or traumatic things in our lives, trying to consider the situation in a broader context that gives us like a long-term perspective is really helpful. I know I often try to practice gratitude, and even if I don't feel it in the moment, by saying, you know what, I'm kind of thankful for this experience. And it allows me to tune into what potential, if anything, this hard thing can serve in my life in a positive light. Which brings me to maintaining a hopeful outlook. Trying to visualize what you want, rather than worrying about what you're fearing in the moment or what's really bothering you in the moment is also really helpful. And then lastly, I had taking care of yourself and reaching out. Paying attention to your needs and your feelings and taking the time to tune in is so important. And engaging in activities, even if it's like little things that you know allow you to refuel or make you feel relaxed. And if none of that's working, then it's seeking out that professional support for someone that'll slowly bring you to the capacity to tend to those needs and find ways to refuel. So I want you to give yourself a hug now. Everyone hugging? Give yourself a hug and press on, because you do have purpose and you do have power. So wherever you are, I'm not going to be able to hear you, but repeat after me. I'll go slowly. I love myself. I respect myself. I believe in myself. I am also proud of myself. Yes, I can do this thing called life. I matter. I am resilient. And every single day, I have the capacity to reinvent myself. So I hope you guys felt that hug good and tight. If you haven't done it yet, do it now. Physical touch always helps us, even if it's self-love. And now it's time for Q&A. I hope that was enough. So let me know what you got. I believe we have some time for questions.
Okay, thank you, Dalissy. Just checking to see, Siobhan, do we have our questions ready?
I do. I have a few questions here for you, Dalissy. The first one is from Shannon. Do you have resources by chance for DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy? My child is turning 18 and we were told she would have to find a new counselor with this training.
Yes, so dialectical behavioral therapy, it's an evidence-based treatment, highly recommended. So if we can get, I don't know how this works, but if the team can get Shannon's information, I'd be more than willing to reach out and see how we can connect her to a DBT specialist. And so contact information and where she lives to help us narrow down some of those resources. and including websites. So off the top of my head, I don't have anything right now, but eventually, like, we can get that to Shannon. And the other recommendation is anytime you're looking for any sort of mental health information, the recommendation is make sure you're going to websites that are trusted. So .edu, some of the .govs. There's a lot of information out there, but it's important to make sure where you're getting the information and what the information shared is. And I did get Shannon's information, so I'm going to write it down as you guys share the next question.
Thank you. And the next question comes from, actually, I don't even see the name, so I apologize. The question is, there are often wait lists for counseling service providers. What can I do to take care of myself while waiting to access them?
Good question. Give me one sec. Let me make sure I have this information. Or to the support team, if you could save that information for me too, that would be really helpful.
Yes,
So
definitely.
what do you do meanwhile? Good question. I think a lot of times now, it's almost like don't give up. So it's try to call a number of providers, because if one tells you that they have a wait list for 3 months, that's very different than someone who may tell you I can get you started in 2 weeks versus months, or that they don't know when they can get you in. So definitely, I always say keep a notebook, keep track of who you called, what they said, and then try and make sure that, you get the soonest available appointment. The other thing is that, again, we're in a world where if there's access to internet, usually through the phone or whatever it may be, there are webinars, free webinars, YouTube videos, podcasts, what am I missing? Audiobooks. There's a lot of resources where it allows us to get a lot of information, and a lot of those do involve like personal or practical applications of the things that they are recommending. So I think educating ourselves is really important, but there's a lot of other resources where they will talk about helpful steps. Sometimes support groups might be easier to get in through. And in our virtual world, sometimes it means you're able to join from different places. So www.psychologytoday.com, to the previous question as well, that is a directory of mental health providers, but they also have information about different things that you can search, like articles they release. So that's an option. And other than that, it's really just finding what area you're most interested in learning about, or where you feel you need more support, and you utilizing those services. Reaching out to your community too. So calling your local 211 or information and referral line to ask what resources they have. And sometimes that can be done online by county. So let's say you're looking up Chester County resources, and they may list a lot of different resources. But reaching out to friends and family that may know. And the last thing I'll say is that there are always 24-hour hotlines, and that's nationally and locally. And I know for Delaware and Pennsylvania, there's also what they call like a peer support or warm line, where even if it's not 24 hours, there's actually a number you can call when you're feeling really overwhelmed, and someone will kind of talk to you and give you that space. And that's available any day versus having to wait for an appointment.
Thank you very much, Dalissy. We have another question. This is coming from a Facebook listener. It says, my son is afraid to go to school, even in the fall. What can I do to help him get used to school again after COVID? He is still too young for the vaccine.
Okay. Great question. So as we deal with the getting back to normal, there's going to be a lot of discomfort, anxiety. But again, we're resilient. So we do slowly, or sometimes even quickly, we're able to adapt. So I'm not sure how old this child is, but we are anticipating that with children. And one of the recommendations is 2 reminders for you as a mental health provider. Anxiety is normal. Discomfort is normal. We don't need it to be at 0, but there is a difference between like having anxiety at a 10 where we don't know what to do with it, or having it like a little lower. And one of the ways to do that is practice or preparation. And so for the mothers out there, as they prepare their children, it may be that if there's opportunities during the summer where they can slowly re-engage socially with either a summer program, even if it's just one day, that might be the option, or visiting the school, or thinking about like, okay, what is the day going to look like? The more exposure, as long as it's controlled, and practice per se, the easier it is going to be when it's time to go back. Obviously, I don't know what schools are going to offer, if they offer going into the school to visit ahead of time or meeting the teachers. There's a lot of little things that will help a child or even an adolescent feel more in control. Like there's some things they know to expect, and then other things where we can be honest, and it's like, we're going to take it one day at a time as you go back. So I hope that helps. AnxietyBC.com is another website that has tools for anxiety, like even toolkits. And that could be really helpful too, like different exercises about re-engaging. I'm not sure how much time we have, so you guys continue to let me know.
I believe that was our last question.
Okay, so I want to clarify the 2 websites I mentioned, and maybe I could share a few more. So, and I'm gonna actually share my contact for whoever would like to write it down. But the websites are psychologytoday.com, anxiety, B for boy, C for cat.com. And then another one I like for moms, children, families is kidshealth.org. So KIDS health.org. And they have tabs that it's like for children, adolescents, and for parents. And because it's through the Children's Hospital, it covers transitions for families, stressors, medical, mental health, different resources, but it'll even have an article like how do you talk to a child, resources for adolescents, and then it has a tab that's for parents. And so they share the information appropriate to the audience. And yeah, if you have my email, any questions are welcomed. I think Siobhan is muted.
Hey, how about that? Can you tell I'm not a technical person? I apologize, everyone. Thank you, Dalissy, for spending this time with us and giving us that wonderful information and discussing the important topics of mental health. Next, we're going to give away our next door prize. So it looks like Miss Shannon, our first question, she's actually the winner. You're the winner of the jewelry dish and the earrings. So congratulations. We do have your information, so we'll make sure that we get that prize to you. So we do appreciate everyone's participation. And again, Dalissy, we thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Congrats, Shannon. I hope that brightened your day, and continue to enjoy the conference. It was my pleasure to join you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So we will reach out to you shortly, Shannon, like I said. And coming up at 1 o'clock, we have our final workshop of the day, which is a beauty segment with Donna from Mary Kay. And I forgot to thank our title sponsor, Benchmark Federal Credit Union, but also our engagement sponsor, which is Health Partners Insurance. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you back at 1.